Impeachment debacle day 2 is upon us. We have Elizabeth Warren versus the billionaires. MSNBC goes full deep state. Deval Patrick jumps in the Democratic primary. And Obama versus Trump on Ukraine coming up.
I did not watch it. I'm too busy to watch it. It's a witch hunt. It's a hoax. I'm too busy to watch it. So I'm sure I'll get a report. There's nothing. I have not been briefed. No, there's nothing there. I see they're using lawyers that are television lawyers. They took some guys off television. You know, I'm not surprised to see it because Schiff can't do his own questions.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. A big swing and a miss for Democrats yesterday on Capitol Hill. Man, was that whole thing a waste. Now, it's one thing to say that it's boring. We would expect most of these congressional proceedings are boring, and that's why in the soundbite culture we live in, people only remember a few moments where somebody gets testy, point of order, people yelling. People are screaming, why? They don't know. Protesters in the back, shrieking, things like that. That tends to be what is memorable from these things. But usually there's some substance to it, or you'd like to think there's some substance to it. There's more than just the ramblings of partisans and the musings of bureaucrats. But guess what? That's pretty much all you had yesterday, except when some of the Republicans were able to step up. Jim Jordan getting put on the Intelligence Committee last minute, by the way. Well played, Republican leadership. Give a little credit where it's due, everybody. Congressman Jordan had a strong showing yesterday. But it is one thing for it to be boring. It's another thing for it to be pointless. Anyone listening, watching yesterday would have to think, what do the Democrats believe that they are really proving here? Abuse of power that was not in fact abused? Crimes that were not committed? And that even if the acts alleged as crimes were committed, would not actually be crimes. What do they think they are putting together here? I think the Democrats, unfortunately for them, are suffering from a degree of Trump derangement syndrome. I remember when I was in the CIA, we would often be reminded by some of our more senior mentors, don't think that the enemy is a bunch of geniuses. That can lead to mistakes on your side. Don't think that the opposition has some magnificent strategy. Don't underestimate them, but don't overestimate them either. And I think here what we see is a Democrat opposition to Trump that is driven first and foremost by a deep, seething resentment and hatred of this president and this presidency. And then anything else is a secondary consideration, anything other than just Trump bad, orange man bad, as the phrase goes on social media. That's the driving theory behind so much of this. Well, Trump is awful, so let's just approach everything from the baseline perspective of Trump is awful. What did we really find out yesterday? What did we see? Well, you had a couple of bureaucrats from the State Department, one of whom showed up in his fanciest bow tie. And there was analysis written in newspapers, I'm serious, about how the bow tie was meant to tie into his official State Department portrait to show that this is work and business and that this is his career. I mean, these people are nuts. They really are. There's something that has gone very, very wrong with them. But nobody could come away from yesterday. I mean, there were some people, I'll be honest with you, there are a couple even. I've always thought that Judge Napolitano, for example, he's always been very gentlemanly to me, and I cannot say a bad word. I would not say a bad word about the man personally whenever I've interacted with him. He's becoming one of the worst analysts on TV because he never sees anything other than Trump is bad, Trump is guilty. And he doesn't understand that that's not really feasible. That's what MSNBC does. That's what CNN does. So there are these places where they're so stuck in the loop of everything Trump is awful, and he must have committed a crime. We just have to find out what the crime is, that there's no taking a step back. The audience has been conditioned for this, and they expect it. Anyone who would show up and say, what exactly is the impeachable offense here? In fact, the witnesses were asked yesterday what the impeachable offenses were. The witnesses were asked to tell us, and they by the way, had nothing. They don't know. What is they don't know. In the past, it was very clear during impeachment proceedings exactly what was going on. You look at Andrew Johnson, he removed the Secretary of War in contravention to what Congress had enacted, and guess what? The Senate was like, nah, even though everybody hated Johnson at the time. Going back in the 19th century now, everybody hated Andrew Johnson. I mean, even his own party, but they were like, nah, we can't kick him out for this. This is nonsense. Okay. You had Bill Clinton. Why was he impeached? And he was impeached. People always seem to forget this. He wasn't removed. He was impeached because he lied under oath, which is a felony, and for which he was disbarred. Bill Clinton broke the law. Bill Clinton should have gone to prison. People forget this. He was absolutely nailed, hand in the cookie jar, caught lying, no question about it. There's no exception in federal law for I was lying under oath about a material fact, but it was like a really personal thing. That doesn't exist. Was he prosecuted after he left office? No, of course not. Did they even press the criminal case again? Did they remove him from office? No, they didn't. But at least everybody was very clear about what, and there were other articles of impeachment as well, but there was a crime that was committed. And he was guilty of that crime, which I think is worth noting. You go back to Nixon. Nixon didn't even get impeached. Why? Because Nixon was donezo, and he knew it. They had Nixon. Public opinion had turned against him. His own party had turned against him. And that was all she wrote. What is the donezo moment here exactly? What's the big reveal? I mean, Jim Jordan, for example, was pressing diplomat Bill Taylor, and these guys, Taylor and the other guy, they were out of central casting for pinstriped wearing, foggy bottom, stuffy, pseudo-intellectual policy folks. I mean, this is like exactly what I used to deal with them. I'm not just some journo who runs around, let me just say the things that I think. No, I used to have to deal with them. I had to deal with them overseas. Some members of the State Department, I've got to tell you, have a particularly negative view of the real work that the intelligence agencies are doing sometimes. But I digress. Jim Jordan here pressed Taylor on the issue of, okay, what really happened here exactly? Play 7, please.
President Zelensky had to commit to an investigation of Biden's before the aid got released, and the aid got released and he didn't commit to an investigation.
Mr. I was not wrong about what I told you, which is what I heard. That's all I've said. I've told you what I heard.
And that's the point. What you heard did not happen. It didn't happen. You had 3 meetings with the guy. He could have told you. He didn't announce he was going to do an investigation before the aid happened. It's not just could it have been wrong. The fact is it was wrong because it didn't happen. The whole point was you had a clear understanding that aid will not get released unless there's a commitment. Not maybe, not I think the aid might happen, and it's my hunch it's going to get released. You used clear language, clear understanding, and commitment. And those 2 things didn't happen, so you had to be wrong.
Ms. Jordan, the other thing that went on when that assistance was on hold is we shook the confidence of a close partner in our reliability. And that's
not what this proceeding's about, Ambassador Taylor.
Has expired.
That's not what this whole thing started on.
We shook the confidence of an ally, and that's really scary when you're in the State Department. I mean, come on. Shook the confidence of an ally. You know what shakes the confidence of an ally more? When the Obama administration presides over the greatest, while Obama's in office, you have the most aggressive and expansionistic Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, my friends. That seems to get left out of this discussion somehow. What Crimea? When did these things happen again? When did the invasion of Ukraine occur? And when did the Crimea false referendum happen so that Russia could just pick it off? Oh yeah, that's right. It's the Obama administration. And when there were Ukrainians who were getting slaughtered on the front lines, thousands of them trying to fight back against a Russian incursion. What did the Obama administration do again? Oh, that's right. Sent them blankets and MREs. Well, that was really something. When Russian-backed separatists shot a civilian jetliner out of the sky, killing, by the way, a large number. I mean, everybody lost there. It was a tragedy, but also killing a large number of globally renowned AIDS researchers. So who knows what the long-term implications of that, how many lives are affected by that case of mistaken surface-to-air missile identity. What did the Obama administration do? Oh, that's right. A lot of just yammering about nothing. Oh, they're such strong partners for Ukraine. They're such strong partners that Trump came along and he's like, let's actually give them the missiles so that the Russian armor can't just overrun Ukrainian fighting positions and keep pushing the line of control deeper and deeper into Ukrainian territory. And there's no debate about this, by the way. There's no argument about whether or not this happened. In fact, just to be very, very sure, to be very clear, here's again Ambassador Taylor getting asked by Jim Jordan. Lethal aid, who was a yay and who was a nay? Which president was down for it and which president wasn't? Please play 10.
During the 2014 to 2016 period, I was serving outside of government and joined two other former ambassadors to Ukraine in urging the Obama administration officials at the State Department, Defense Department, and other agencies to provide lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine in order to deter further Russian aggression. I also supported much stronger sanctions on Russia. I was pleased when the Trump administration provided Javelin anti-tank missiles and enacted stronger sanctions.
Oh, so the Trump administration, which remember, same media that tells you that Trump should be impeached and crimes and high crimes and misdemeanors, such a bad guy. Let's just make sure that we have the record straight here. Trump, who they say, the same media says, is Putin's puppet, he comes into office and takes more dramatic and meaningful action against Russia than Obama did. And Obama was the one who, by the way, was the leader of the free world when Ukraine is getting carved up and Crimea is seized through this this phony Russian referendum not recognized by the international community, whatever that means. And yet Trump is the bad guy who should be kicked out of office because somebody heard a thing from a person who thinks that Trump created a quid pro quo, except there was no quid and there was no quo. Trump did not do the thing he said he would do if the Ukrainians did not do the thing that they were supposed to do, which they didn't. What are we talking about? What is this? It's a sham. The whole thing is a sham. Driven by the fear of the Democratic Party that they might have to live under 4 more years of Trump. I mean, there are limits, I think, to even how far their hysteria can go with, oh, Trump stole the 2020 election too. Every election is stolen that they lose now. This is the Stacey Abrams maneuver from Georgia, by the way. Just say that the other guy cheated. Just keep saying it. Do you have any proof? Nah. Just say they cheated, though, because that's really good for democracy, and that's really good for bringing us together about serious political issues. It's just, look, yesterday was a belly flop for the Democrats. No question about it. It was just, I'm not going to say it. Nothing burger. We got to get nothing burger out of the language. It's not what does it even mean? It was nothing. How about just that? It was a waste of everybody's time for no real purpose other than the catharsis that Democrats get from just pretending that Trump should no longer be the president of the United States. It was a debacle, my friends, an utter debacle. And today, I don't think will be very different. But there's some other areas here that I would like to get to.
Mr. Goldman, what I can do here for you today is tell you what I heard from people. And in this case, it was what I heard from Ambassador Sondland.
So the biggest witnesses, remember, they tried to come out with a bang, although Yovanovitch is going to testify today, and maybe she'll I don't know, get into hysterics, but the Ukrainians, we abandoned them. I mean, we didn't, and Trump was actually a better friend to them than Obama, but like, oh my God. Here's another, let me tell you a little truth about the State Department. And I have some good friends who work there, but they would admit privately that what I say about the State Department is all true. So just a question of, is it a little bit less bad at some of the things that I say it's bad that it is? I mean, you could argue that maybe, but the State Department is full of a lot of people who the issue they're working is the most important thing in the world. If somebody is trying to figure out how we get a improved literacy program through the State Department for the island of Vanuatu or something, that the people working on that program in the State Department, let me tell you, if it's getting new drapes for the embassy in Belgium, that the people working on that at the State Department, man, we need those drapes for the embassy. The future of the country depends on. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but not that much. This is certainly true of any foreign policy issue that is coming to the forefront right now on Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is, it's a U.S. ally, and it's a thing that we should pay attention to, but does anyone ever stop to ask, how much are we really supposed to care about Ukraine? Are we allowed to ask the question? I mean, I wish them well. I have Ukrainian friends, great country, lovely people. We're helping them out. We put some sanctions. Okay. This is not, the world doesn't really rest on the balance of every conversation that President Trump has with President Zelensky of Ukraine. In fact, really what needs to happen is the Ukrainians and the Russians need to kind of figure this out. But, we are told that this is an issue that we all must be focused in on, that it's more important than the economy in this country, securing our border, ending endless wars, all these different areas of the Trump administration that, getting rid of regulation. By the way, there's a fascinating chart that I saw that showed business regulation by state. No surprise. The bluer a state, the more regulations. It's like almost like a perfect the more you've got blue in a state, the more regulations you have. All of that, though, is secondary to Ukraine. We must do everything for Ukraine. Maybe not.
We thought that Mykola Zlochevsky had stolen money. We thought a prosecutor had taken a bribe to shut the case, and those were our main concerns.
And are you in favor of that matter being fully investigated and prosecuted?
I think since U.S. taxpayer dollars were wasted, I would love to see the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office find who the corrupt prosecutor was that took the bribe and how much it was paid. And that's what I said to the Deputy Prosecutor General on February 3rd, 2015.
So you had George Kent, the other bureaucrat, the bow-tied one, who is telling us that, Burisma, the prosecutor, there was really corrupt stuff going on there. In fact, Ukraine is, based on some of the assessments I've seen, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So why would it be so strange, given that our aid policy to Ukraine was contingent? Oh, that's a quid pro quo. Isn't it a contingency, a quid pro quo? You do this or else. But we already had contingencies about the need for reform, for change in Ukraine because of the corruption. And keep in mind that the corruption also ties very much into concerns about Russian influence. What is the best way? If you're the Russian government, what is the best way to get a pro-Russian sentiment going, or to get the policies that you want enacted? Buy off politicians, buy off prosecutors. I mean, that's the most effective way. Sure, you can have paramilitaries in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine who are seizing territory and pretending they're an indigenous separatist force when really it's all just being bankrolled by Moscow. And you've got Spetsnaz who are pretending to be Ukrainian. It's complicated, though, because in the Donbas region, guess what? You have a lot of Ukrainians who are Russian speakers. First language is Russian. Then they learn Ukrainian because the state tells them that they should. The western part of Ukraine tends to be the more westernized, cosmopolitan, if you will, but the eastern part, the Donbass, is where the money is. It's where the mines are, it's where the factories are, it's where the industrial heartland that subsidizes the rest of the country. So there is this tension going on there. But if you want a more pro-Russian tilt, what's the best way that you can do it if you're Putin or if you're any of Putin's henchmen? And just pay off people who are in charge of rooting out corruption to make sure that then you can pay off the people as the corruption, right? I mean, so why would it then be off limits for the President of the United States, given that long-established history of corruption in Ukraine? Why can't the president say, hey, to his counterpart who has come into office, Zelensky of Ukraine, comes into office as a reformer he's a swamp drainer. Zelensky's supposed to drain the swamp. Why is it then wrong for the President of the United States to say to him, hey, how's that coming along? And what serious human being really believes that paying off Hunter Biden to put him on the board of an incredibly corrupt company in a very corrupt country was on the up and up? You see, this is where I depart from many of my even pro-Trump or reasonably pro-Trump colleagues in the media. I'm sorry, if, for example, there had been a decision made by the Trump administration when it came into office to look at the non-prosecution prosecution decision of Hillary Clinton, who broke the law, they're allowed to do that. Now, you could say that would be bad for the country. It would be it would be dividing us too much, whatever it may be. They are legally within their rights to do exactly that. So what then becomes the issue? One of discretion and one of judgment, one of politics, really. But there was no criminal statute. There was no legal barrier, unless you're going to say the statute of limitations had passed, but I don't think it had when Trump came into office, for Hillary Clinton to be charged, but she wasn't charged. There is also no specific legal barrier to, hey, do you know what's going on with this Biden guy and his son in eastern Ukraine? Let me know. That's the way it is. Folks, they started an investigation of Trump using FISA warrants when he was running for president. Democrats, the DNC, funded a project. That project was used by Democrats within the government and in the media to get FISA warrants against Carter Page, to open an FBI investigation based on George Papadopoulos, saying a couple things in a bar, allegedly. I'm sorry, was there no special Trump immunity? There is apparently special Joe Biden and Hunter Biden immunity. We just don't know about it. Trump was allowed to make that ask. That it is politically sensitive doesn't matter to the law. Trump is allowed to make. They're trying to say it's bribery, it's extortion. He said, can you find out something about this for me? Zelensky could have come back the next day and said, yeah, man, we looked into it. There's really nothing there. Nothing happened. But first of all, that didn't even happen. I mean, Trump was speaking with a counterpart who never knew that the aid was even on hold and under review. Reviewing aid is something that administrations do all the time. Trump is being more helpful to Ukraine than Obama was. No question. No one can deny that. And you would think that, because considering Obama was president while Ukraine is being carved up, he might have had a little bit more of an impetus, but no. I mean, Obama's real foreign policy was just, well, actually, I can't even really describe what the organizing principle of his foreign policy was. I think it was just driven by what's going to get the happiest responses in the comments section of the HuffPost and the New York Times. That's what I think was driving his foreign policy. I can't tell you what, don't do stupid stuff. That doesn't help all that much. But these are issues on which there's no disagreement, yet we're still here being told that Trump did something horrible, did something awful. What is the awful thing? Oh, now they're saying it's extortion. I'm hoping that everybody remembers that there was talk of this as a campaign finance violation, just so we can see that they just keep readjusting the charge to try to fit the facts. because they can't have the facts they need for the charge they want. It could not be any more clear what is going on here. But investigating the Bidens, investigating what happened here with Burisma is legitimate. It is legitimate. I don't know how many times we have to. People can keep trying to say that it's not, but at the end of the day, the president in his conduct of foreign policy can speak to a foreign counterpart about issues of corruption that happen to touch on a bunch of Americans and a bunch of Americans that maybe are really important to the Democratic Party. Doesn't mean that they have immunity, folks. Maybe the Democrats should think a little bit more, think long and hard about their reckless weaponization of investigation, of the usage of the federal bureaucracy against their political opponents, which they do time and time and time again, with no accountability and with really minimal pushback from most conservatives, most people on the right. Oh, the process is the process. Really? What about the abuse that Democrats have engaged in with the entirety of the Mueller probe? The abuse that Democrats engaged in day in and day out, claiming, people like Adam Schiff, that there was information that would prove the President of the United States was a traitor to his country, working on behalf of Russia, not just to win the election, but to win the election to be a Russian stooge. These people are out of their minds. Any accountability for this? No. In fact, the Democratic Party picked up a lot of seats and did well in the midterm election. What does that tell you? They think this is working. Even if it doesn't get the outcome they want, it slows down Trump. It forces this administration to play defense. Can you imagine what it would be like if we were really just listening to the president going around making his pitch, talking about things like bringing down the price of prescription drugs, which should absolutely happen, of building the wall, which I will get to. There's an update here later on that we have to get to about that in the show. No, instead, it's the president trying to convince people of the fact that he's not a traitor, that he doesn't work for the Russians. I mean, this is so stupid, it's beyond belief. You have an entire industry of national security experts who go on television and say crazy things that turn out to be provably false, and really they're maniacally wrong. Like, they don't care. They still somehow believe that something still happened there, even though nothing happened there. And they get promoted. They get book deals. They get put on fancy talk shows. There's just no accountability from whatsoever, because the purpose is to advance the anti-Trump narrative. It's not to be right. It's not to be fair. It's not to be correct. And those are the organizing principles of this impeachment process. Anti-Trumpism, not truth, justice, fairness, or anything else. The process, that's all a ruse. That's all a smokescreen. Here you have Jim Jordan pointing. I mean, Jim Jordan was en fuego yesterday. He really was, doing a great job. Here he is on four simple truths. Please play clip 18.
This whole thing is a sad episode for the country. But like we said in the hearing today, 4 facts will never change. The transcript speaks for itself. There was no conditionality, no quid pro quo in the transcript. The 2 guys on the call have both been very clear. No pressure, no pushing, no linkage to investigations in both President Zelensky and President Trump have said. And of course, President Zelensky didn't pledge to do any investigations prior to the aid being released. And the Ukrainians didn't know that the aid was even on hold at the time of the call.
Nothing happened. There was no harm. There was no victim. This is like a trial about a murder where nobody was murdered. Okay, well, what are we doing here? This is the Seinfeld show is famously described as a show about nothing. But of course, it isn't really about nothing, but it's about nothing in particular. It's about Seinfeld. It's about his George and Elaine and Kramer, right? I mean, I'm more of a Friends guy. I know I hear the booing from all across the country, but I'm more of a Friends guy. And even more than that, I'm a How I Met Your Mother guy, but conversation for another time. This is an impeachment about nothing, meaning that the substance is irrelevant. It's all about the theatrics. It's all about the show. Oh, Trump. This is a serious. That's why Nancy Pelosi was like doing fake tears. Oh, It's so serious, this impeaching the president. We really didn't want to do it, but we've known. I've been saying they're going to do it. You've been saying we've known they're going to do this for years. For years. They have to show that they're repudiating Trump because they can't say that Trump has failed. That's the problem. It's stunning to see also the way that the media, we'll get more into some of the media stuff later, but the way the media just doubles down on all of their nonsense. They never learn the lesson, folks. They're never going to change. I really hope, I think people should cut cable and start just going to people that they trust online, going to digital outlets. If you look, for example, now I'm basically doing a free commercial for them, but I really do like the folks over at The Federalist. If you look at thefederalist.com and the analysis and claims that it has made throughout the Russia collusion / now Ukraine fiasco, and compare that, and you could also look at what I've said here. How many times have I had to come on the show and say to you, guys, I really didn't see this coming. I'm sorry. It looks like I was really off on this one. Looks like there was Russia collusion. Looks like the Trump Tower meeting is the final blow to this administration. It's all, I just didn't see. Never. I come here, I'm like, the other thing I told you, I was right. And I was right, and you were right. And that's why we hang out in here. My friends, the Federalist, a lot of them, same thing. A bunch of great writers over there. Compare them to the lunatics at MSNBC and CNN and just name, NBC and name a place. Oh, collusion any day now, Russia, all this stuff. These people are ridiculous. They say absurd things. The former CIA director was getting paid by one of these networks to go on TV and say the president did something tantamount to treason. This is like what lunatics would say. No, everyone's fine with it, though. He's not booted from TV. Call the president a traitor, you're fine. Say anything a little critical of a 16-year-old who's being used by adults as an unassailable spokesperson for changing trillions of dollars of the economy, and you're a bad person and you're not allowed to go on TV anymore. This is the world we're living right now. I think we should change it a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, will you be prohibiting witnesses from answering members' questions as you have in the closed-door depositions?
As the gentlewoman should know, if she was present for the deposition.
Which I was, Mr.
For
Chairman.
some of them, yes.
Correct.
The only times I prevented witnesses from answering questions, along with their counsel, was when it was apparent that members were seeking to out the whistleblower. We will do everything necessary to protect the whistleblower's identity, and I'm disturbed to hear members of the committee who have in the past voiced strong support for whistleblower protections seek to undermine those protections by outing the whistleblower.
Mr. Chairman, only one member and their staff on this committee has direct knowledge of the identity of the whistleblower.
Will suspend. You asked a parliamentary inquiry, and I am responding, or a point of order, I'm responding.
How can Adam Schiff think about what he did here? And it should be terrifying to anybody that Adam Schiff was a federal prosecutor at one point and was making decisions about whose life to ruin and who to send to prison, which is what federal prosecutors do. You want somebody like Andy McCarthy in that role, a super smart, ethical, good person. You don't want someone like Adam Schiff in that role. But notice how he says he will not commit to not blocking questions from Republicans. Hold on a second. How can he know that by blocking questions he's protecting the identity of the whistleblower when he doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower? As he told us yesterday in the hearing. How does that work? How would he know if they're getting too close to the idea? Because they can ask people, who did you speak to about the phone call? Who did you speak to about Ukraine policy? How could Adam Schiff conceivably be protecting the whistleblower's identity if he doesn't even know who the whistleblower is? And by the way, I think we all know who the whistleblower is. This whole thing is a sham. This is ridiculous. They just won't confirm it. You know why? Because if they confirm it, then people would be able to say, well, hold on a second. So this anti-Trump partisan who people were concerned about leaking from the NSC to undermine Trump, who had interactions with Biden, clearly is a Bidenist. That guy got this whole thing started, and we're supposed to believe this is in good faith and it's about protecting the Constitution. And no, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to believe the nonsense that the libs are trying to peddle here. But yesterday was quite a sight. Boring, but quite a sight nonetheless.